So I want to welcome everybody to Sell Sidelines. I'm your host, Virgil Reyes, and today we are going to be discussing why it is that our conversations can get very awkward whenever we're on a phone with a prospect. Keep in mind also, just a reminder, we're going to have our new podcast is going to be airing every month. November 6th will be the next launch. So be on the lookout for that. Please also help us out getting the word out. Give this post a heart. Like once you're, if you see the post itself, give it a heart. That lets Facebook's algorithm know that we want to get out there. We want to make sure that we reach as many people as possible so other people can benefit from our trainings as well. If you have any friends that you know that can benefit from this, invite them to the group. All of the links will be inside of the description. Also, again, if you're watching the replay, please hashtag replay. Please help us get the word out there. Also, don't forget, if you're on YouTube, like, share, comment, and subscribe to my YouTube channel. It will be growing here pretty soon. We do have a new channel for the Sales Porn Live podcast, so that's something that I need to share with everybody as well. You'll typically see it inside of the descriptions. So I want you, just in case you're not aware, the way that I have this group set up is I have it so it'll help anybody out from a beginner, a very beginner level, all the way to the advanced. And some of the trainings that we're doing right now are going to be more for beginners than it is for the advanced training. We'll get into that in just a minute, but I want to make sure that I cover all my bases all the way across from the bottom all the way up. So I did label this area in the topics section. You'll see that it says starter pack. If you go inside of there, I left two pieces of resources, and I actually have an updated one, which I will share inside of the comment section today. I put together a more condensed version of the Influencer Attraction Academy is what I'm calling it now. But it's essentially you're building yourself a free funnel to attract quality influencers using your LinkedIn profile. So I will share that in the description below if you're interested in that. As well as if you look again in the starter pack, you're going to see the old video. It's just a lot longer. It's like 40 minutes long because what I wanted to do is convey all of the I guess you could say all of the information so that you understood it well, but I figured out a way to condense all of it. And so I gave that to everyone. Of course, that's for free. I'm hoping that you guys find it extremely useful. If you do find it useful, if you could, drop me a recommendation inside of LinkedIn. That's something that I'm also working on is my LinkedIn profile. That's a couple of things that I've been working on is Facebook, organic traffic or engagement, as well as LinkedIn. The next thing I'll probably be getting into, of course, like you can tell already, is going to be YouTube. The next thing after that is probably going to be Instagram. But I'm trying to take it one step at a time. I don't really like to be too spread out too thin. So I try to do everything kind of like in a certain order so that way I don't get lost on things. But, I feel like I'm way more of an expert today in LinkedIn and Facebook than I ever was in the past. And just so you're aware, in the past, I never had this kind of background. I didn't have any social media. So this is all new and it's working out really well for me. And I'm grateful that I'm able to share this with anybody else out there that needs this information, because I sure as hell wish that I had somebody to help me out when I was starting out. I had no direction whatsoever. Now again, going back to the starter pack, there is also an evaluation sheet where if you're doing role plays, you're practicing you're practicing your closing skills. This is an evaluation sheet that allows you to either share it with your partner, so that way you kind of have a guide on what you need to improve on, and it clearly maps the next step to the next level, so that if you want to improve on that, you can, or you can use it to self-evaluate the way that I usually would self-evaluate in the past before I even developed this evaluation sheet. Is I would look at it, I would score myself, and real honestly, you got to be brutally honest with yourself. I would score myself, and then I would say, okay, this is where I'm at. What do I need to do to get to the next step? And then that's what I would work on. And that's one thing that we need to talk about, because like for beginners, whenever it comes to closing, whenever we're learning something new, you'll typically lose a lot in the process, and you'll have to reteach yourself everything all over again. But it's the exact same thing as martial arts, right? You learn a new kick, it's a very awkward positioning, but eventually once you get the hang of it, now you got to incorporate it with all the other moves that you have. It could be a kick, a grapple, whatever it is. But that's exactly how it works. The same way with sales, is just like any other skill out there. It's something that you have to continually work at. And if you're hungry like me, you're passionate about growth and passionate about helping out others, you're definitely going to utilize this evaluation sheet to get you to the next level. And that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be somebody that's new into sales. It's also very helpful for anybody that's just, like I said, passionate in growth. If you have the skills, but you're unsure on how to go about finding closing opportunities, I recently launched a program called Influencers Unlimited, um, where I have personally developed the a system to empower you to find your own opportunities. And in the process, especially if you're a beginner, like you don't have any experience, you get to leverage my knowledge and experience, so that way whenever you're on an opportunity, it's beneficial that every time you get onto one of those opportunities, that you have everything at your disposal to make sure that you're successful, instead of going through the trial and errors that we need to. And in some cases, when the business owner sees that we're going through a lot of struggles, through the calls, they don't want to train us. You know what I mean? So that's why I put this program together. It is low ticket, but you can look at the link inside of the description, and you'll see that it says influencersunlimited.com. You can go and take a look at all the schedule. Season 6, I'm grateful that I was able to launch a season 6, but that starts tomorrow. So if anybody's interested, please feel free to reach out to me. And if you see the value in it, I'd be more than happy to work with you and see what we can do to help you out. So now today's topic is going to be about why it gets awkward on a conversation with our prospects on the phone. And one of the main reasons might be because you're cold calling, right? So when you're cold calling a prospect, typically what happens is they get a little bit upset because you're calling them at an inopportune time. And there's a lot of different things that we can do to overcome that. But essentially what I want to cover more is going to be like on the warmer leads, because I want to help people out that are with opportunities where their influencer or their business owner partner is investing a lot of money into their marketing, which means that like I was saying before, you're investing anywhere between $50 to $2,000 on your leads, and you want to make sure that every single one of those leads that are warm are being converted. That's very important for the business owner. And at that level, typically you're going to have that experience. But I want to kind of break down what it is that we need to do ourselves to get to the next level, where we're not wasting the business owner, our partner's time, our client's time, and we're able to not only help out ourselves by generating more cash flow for ourselves through closing, but also we're helping out our business opportunity partner. They see us as an asset rather than just as somebody that's just going to waste their time. So when it comes to warmer leads, I want to cover first before we get into the cold calls. So in the warmer leads, there's always going to be times where the prospect, and we're talking about when the prospect schedules a call, whether it's inbound or outbound, it really doesn't matter, but at least they know that they're going to get a call from us. They've been outreached somehow, either through an email, or even if they go through like a Facebook ad, all of a sudden, they've gone through the funnel. They get a schedule. They either get us schedule an appointment onto our calendar so that we can call them back, which is more of an inbound, or you have the outbound, which is, it's sort of an inbound. An outbound, but it's still considered inbound. It's just that we have to reach out to them, and it makes it a little bit more differently, a little bit more different on how we approach it because of our framing. So when it's scheduled and it's an inbound lead, I believe we talked about before how we needed to pre-frame it, make sure that they understand that we're going to give them a call. And in most cases, our business partner will tell us, hey, we've already sent out emails. All you got to do is just make the call, which is great. If not, you got to figure out a way to pre-frame that. Make sure that you reach out to them and let them know that that they're expecting your call, just like they had scheduled. In most cases, people have busy lives, especially in B2B. Like in a B2C scenario, they kind of know their schedule already, but B2B, actually, ever since I started working as a closer, I realized that my schedule is all over the place. Like I try to organize everything. You know what I mean? I try to get everything to where it's streamlined. I don't have to worry about any issues with scheduling. But no matter what happens, everything gets all screwed up. I always get people messaging me like, dude, we had this schedule for this time, and you're nowhere to be found when I'm on the phone call with a client or something. It could be a multiple array of things, but That's one of the biggest problems that I've always run into, is that I at first I tried to stay on a very tight schedule, and then I realized that it's very fluid, kind of like our closing calls. You know, our closing calls are not they're not mapped out. You know, we don't know what to expect. Like, for example, I know that I've always told copywriters, you guys have it easy, because all you're doing is just getting one side of the conversation, and all you got to do is just get into like their needs and their goals, and you have it set. But for us, it's almost like it's more of a give and take. It's more, it's almost more of like a sparring match or like a fight. And not to say that it is, but it's just that, you know, you don't know what you're going to get from the prospect on the phone until you're actually there on the phone. So getting back to the topic, why it gets awkward, whenever a prospect is scheduling a call, of course, they already have a reason why they decided to get on the call with us. In other words, they're already warm. They like everything that they hear. In most cases, it's just a matter of clarity, right? But in other cases, people, you'll notice, get uncomfortable with the phone call. In most cases, if us, as a remote sales representative for our business partner, are talking to them, but we're not quite understanding what it is that they're talking about. So in other words, it's really about understanding the prospect. And one of the biggest challenges and issues that I see is that a lot of closers get lost inside of their mind. And I think that has a lot to do with our prior trainings. So when we're trained in sales and closing techniques, we kind of just stick to that, not realizing that there's still a natural flow in the conversation whenever we're talking to our prospects. But in most cases, with that training comes programming. So when we're programmed to think and react a certain way, in most cases, I notice that a lot of closers they'll stay inside of their head. In other words, rather than listening to the prospect and understanding what it is that they're trying to convey to you, whether it's a question or some information that they share with you, what they end up doing is kind of thinking about, what's going to be my next question? What is it that I need to do? What's the next thing that I have to say to my prospect? um or in most cases, they'll try to figure out like how to map it out, and that's not the way that closing has been, at least not for me. I've closed all across the board through several different opportunities, several different styles, whether it's cold calling to warm leads, inbound, outbound, you name it, I've done it. Which is why I put this group together, because a lot of people don't have experience in all of these things. And even if you get an influencer and you're doing well with it, doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be there forever. But fortunately for you, you can come back to this channel. You can look at some of the resources, some of the past videos. You can look them up on YouTube in the future, where you're going to be able to have access to these things. So I know a lot of people say, well, I got everything going right now. But one thing I've learned about closing is that everything is not for certain. Um, that's part of the reason why most people stay at jobs or as an employee, is for that certainty. They want to get that paycheck. They want to make sure that they're there forever and that it's never going to go away. And I'm sure even through the situation that we're going through at this present time, that a lot of people are shaken up and thinking, how the hell am I going to do this? But it's us, the entrepreneurs, the closers, anybody out there that's in the business world or the business realm, are looking at, how could I adapt to whatever situation that I'm in? And that's the kind of profession that we chose. We chose something that's going to pay at a lot higher rate, but with a lot less uncertainty, which means that we have to adapt in any situation that we go through. So for example, um, I was during the quarantine, or right before the quarantine situation, I was working on an outbound calling scenario, but it was with a well-known influencer, and it was low ticket, so it was very easy to sell. Because the guy was somewhat of a celebrity. The tickets were low ticket, and if they could get into the presence of that celebrity, they were happy. It's almost like selling tickets to a concert or to a football game or to a basketball game. So it made it very easy. However, that month, like, we would get paid every month. At the end of that month, which was right before the quarantine, that's when we had to end up giving the refunds back. And I had to figure out what to do to adapt. So that's something that I had to implement. And that's something that all of us here are going to have to get used to. Now, getting back to the topic though, we want to make sure that every single one of those calls that we have are going to be helped in no matter what it is that they need to do. Hi, Archana, how are you? Thanks for joining us. But when it comes to the inbound leads, like I said, it's going to be more about the flow of the call. Like if you notice, when you're training, it's always going to be kind of a little bit of a difficulty because you're thinking of what you need to do next. Even when it comes to like going back to the reference of like mixed martial arts, some people when they're in a grapple position where they're held down, on the mat and they can't move, and for a second they have a time, while they're trying to catch their breath, they have a moment to think, okay, how can I get out of this situation? And that's the mentality that we get into whenever we're on a phone call. So we want to make sure that we practice, of course, yes, outside of what we do inside of the calls, but try to keep it in a regular flow whenever you're talking. And I think that's part of naturally what helps me to understand remote sales and how to get through it, is because no matter what situation I went through, I realized that there was not one set form of how to close. In other words, I used to have that mentality when I was going through training that, oh shoot, I messed up. That probably lost a sale right there. And it's not like that. It's really about the engagement and the flow of the conversation. So if there's a lot of give and take, it's going really well. But in most cases, the prospect will ask a question. And going back to previous videos that I've put together, I've mentioned that in most cases when a person asks that question, it's really about the physiology of what they're saying. It's about understanding why it is that they're asking that question. And if you're not clear about that, it's always nice to have a clear understanding of what it is that they're thinking. So in most cases, I would go like, I noticed that you asked this question. Why that question? Why questions are very powerful because it goes to a deeper level every single time. So when you ask them, oh, well, it's because, and then they'll tell you, my job is in the way, or I have weekends, I'm working, I'm going to my son's football games, you name it. I'm at fill in the blank, but you get what I'm saying. It's really about understanding why it is that they're asking the question that they ask. And in most cases, when they ask their question, it's really not even relevant to whether or not they're going to buy it. It's just more of like just a moment of clarity that they need. But when we answer the surface level question that they give us, uh, what we're doing is we're actually locking ourselves out to helping them out. So when you just answer the question, if it's a simple yes or no, or well, it's in the evenings. In most cases, I would say, well, just out of curiosity, like, what is it about that situation? What is the reason that you asked me that question? Is it because it's going to mess with your schedule? If it's a scheduling type question, then they would tell you, well, yeah, it's because I actually have X, Y, and Z going on, and I wanted to see if we can fit this. And now you can answer it more towards their needs rather than just according to what they say. Because in most cases, like if somebody says, well, what are the hours, of this program or whatever, and I tell them, it's going to be 3 p.m. EST every Friday afternoon. And they say, okay, so 3 p.m. EST Friday afternoon, I'm sorry, but that's not going to work. And then right there, you're shutting them off completely. But in most cases, you can work it out with them, where if you just understand their situation, you can work with them. You can say, well, what if we were to do this? What if we were to help you out with, like, I don't know, recorded calls, or if we had another scheduling where it wasn't conflicting with your scheduling, do you think that you might pick this up? And they might say yes. And if you can help that, then you have a better opportunity of them saying yes. But in most cases, because you don't understand the physiology, the way that they process that data to ask that question is the reason why that conversation gets a little bit awkward. You get a real solid no right at the beginning, because what they're looking at is if it feels this, I mean, if it messes with my schedule, just as a general example, then it's not going to be beneficial for me. However, like I said, if you can talk around that, like let's say, for example, if it's a baseball game, or not a baseball game, but just a practice, say, oh, well, that's nice. Speaking of your child, whoever they are, if they open up about that, what's the schedule look like whenever you do the trainings? And in most cases, like if you have your own personal information, it's always best to throw that out first. Because again, like I said, it's an exchange, it's a flow going back and forth. So you can say, you know what, I used to do practices as well. I used to have Taekwondo practices for my daughter. And I know that those typically would be like somewhere around 2 to 3 hours every week on such and such day. So is that what it's like for your son? And what if they say, well, no, actually he has it 3 times a week, but I was hoping that I could be there every single time. Okay, so if we were to help you out to accomplish whatever it is, help them with a solution to their problem, or help them achieve a goal, do you think that that would be important enough that you might just be able to miss out on X amount of games, whether it's, just depending on how long the program is, for an example. And if they say, yeah, actually, that's something that I would be willing to sacrifice, now you have a different conversation in your hands, and you've just right now leveraged their situation to help them weigh, whether or not it's going to be beneficial for them to continue forward with the conversation, or to just to say, what, flat out, no, that's okay. I got this. Because in most cases, that's how objections come. I mean, I've heard some crazy objections. And when you ask them, why do you ask that question? And then they answer, you're like, okay, well, there's a simple solution to that. I mean, what if we did this? And, usually you don't want to tell them what to do, but just as a suggestion, well, let's brainstorm together. What if we were to do this? Would that, do you think that that would help out your situation and kind of persuade you that, yeah, maybe this is something that I could do? And it's funny the way that people respond. It's like, oh yeah, I didn't think about that. Like, for example, just one example that I had, I can't give too much information, of course, because of NDAs and whatnot, but I did have a prospect that wanted to get into a brick and mortar business. And, in most brick and mortar businesses, like in construction, you need to use a truck, right? So you can carry around your equipment and things like that. And some equipment, it's just too big for like a compact car. And he happened to have a compact car. And the funny thing is, like, he was giving me a scenario, and he's like, yeah, like, say, for example, if I had a Prius, and I go, do you happen to have a Prius? And he said, yeah, actually I do. So once I knew that, then I was able to kind of take the dimensions and work with him. But we essentially told him some of the equipment can stick out the window, until you can build up enough income so that you can generate enough income to purchase your own truck, just a used truck, maybe $2,000-3,000 just to get you going. And the funny thing was, like, he was more focused on the situation of having things popping out of his window. And I had to bring up to him, I said, look, I understand that that's a concern for you, but realistically, a lot of people, whenever they're trying to get into programs and things like that, that they know it's going to be a solution to their problem, they're not focused on whether or not that something is sticking out of their window on their car. It's more of a pride issue than it is really, like, whenever people, especially entrepreneurs, when they want to get out of their job, for example, which is what the situation was, what they'll do is they'll end up taking out, they don't care about what it takes to get there. They just want to get there, right? Because they're in a situation that's very difficult as it is. So they say, I'm willing to sacrifice something sticking out of my window rather than dealing with what I'm doing now. So that's why it's important to get down to the understanding of why it is that they ask the questions that they do. And again, at first, it becomes very uncomfortable. If you've never done this before, you'll realize that it does get a little uncomfortable asking those kind of questions because it's not natural to you. I think if you do it enough in a practice, you might sound a lot more natural going off into the conversation inside of the call. Now, it does, like when it comes to sales training, it's great because it's teaching us, it's preparing us for things that we need to anticipate, whether it's in person, door to door, over the phones, on a live call, on a live virtual call. That's great. But in some cases, we can get a little bit too focused on what it is that we're putting out rather than what we're getting. And when we do that, it's definitely something that would hinder us from creating that conversational flow, that rapport, that trust building with our prospects. And I think that that's extremely important so that you don't get into an awkward situation. And even if you do get yourself in an awkward situation, which I've had a lot of times, like I've had defensive people, especially on colder calls. But you can get yourself out of that. It's just a matter of finding common ground with them and then being able to work up the conversation to the next step. So I'm realizing that we're having trouble with the stream. Let me try and refresh this again, see if I can get this going again. Okay, it looks like it's happening. So I just want to know, can everybody hear me okay so far? Everything good? All right, so I'll continue on. I'll see in the messages because I know that there's a delay. But going back to the train, I don't know how much you heard. If it was streaming on my end, it was showing that it wasn't streaming anymore. But understanding the physiology, extremely, extremely crucial. We need to understand that our training will kind of hold us back because we're always thinking about what to say and how to react. And in most cases, you can take somebody that has had no training whatsoever, put them on a phone call, and they would actually have a lot more they would make a lot more traction inside of that conversation because they're not thinking about selling it. They're just thinking about talking to the person on the other side of the line. And the training again does help, but you have to be able to incorporate that with your conversations. And like early on in life, that's something that I learned is that talking to people is just great. Hey, Brian, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it, man. Um, so right now we're talking about the topic is why it gets awkward onto a conversation with our prospects. Um, so the sales training, again, it is helpful, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to just going back to the reference of martial arts. What you practice in the dojo and what you learn doesn't necessarily mean that it's quickly and easily transferable into the real world. So when you're in a real brawl, it becomes extremely different, which is one of the main reasons why a lot of closers, whenever they're practicing and they're learning about closing, I try to get them into a real scenario, whether it's a great opportunity or not. The one thing I'll tell them is you need to get out there into the real world, get onto those real phone calls, because there's no training like that. If you just stay practicing all the time, it doesn't matter how much you perfect that. Believe it or not, once you get out of that training situation, what some people would refer to as a dojo, and you get into the real world, you're going to see that there's a world of difference whenever you're talking to your prospects, being able to qualify them, going through things like that. So try not to take your training as gospel. There's a lot of different things out there that we can learn to help us out in conversations, incorporating sales into our conversations. But more importantly, like I said, than the training is going to be how well we can communicate with that person, how well we can build rapport with that person, which is why I said that without training, in most cases, you can teach somebody or you can get somebody onto a sales call and they'll do pretty well, you know what I mean, with building that relationship. But when it comes to the sales side of things, that's where they fail. That's why you need to incorporate both worlds together. You can't just have one without the other. Don't lean too much into the sales training that you're given. And at the same time, don't lean too much on not selling at all. There's got to be a great merge between both worlds, but you just got to find that median. And you're never going to find it unless you get onto those real calls and learn it yourself, which is one of the biggest challenges, because I think that a lot of people, whenever they start closing, they anticipate that they're just going to make money very easily. It's not. It takes a lot of work. It's just like anything else. If you think about going back to martial arts again, martial artists don't come out of the gym and then start winning bouts, undefeatedly. Of course, they have to go through some losses. Of course, they have to go. It may not be on their record, on their public record, but they've gone through some losses. No matter how you dice it up, there's always something that they need to go through in order to succeed. There's always going to be failures to reach the success. Now, when I talk about like the battling, the sparring, whenever we're talking on a phone call, it's not necessarily like that where you have to outwit the other person, but it's more about just like understanding the environment that you're in. And it may not be like a physical environment. I'm talking about more of a mental environment, right? Because when we're talking to somebody, it's more about understanding, like I said, their situation rather than us just trying to outwit them. Again, like I said, it's not like a set process that needs to happen in order to, I guess you could say, sell whatever it is that you're selling. Keep in mind that whenever we're on a conversation with somebody, they absolutely have a need. And if we don't understand that need, then we can get too attached to the sell, which is a funny thing is that even with training, in most cases, I've seen people very attached to the sell. You know what I mean? They just get too attached. Even when somebody says no, rather than understanding why they said no, it's more about like pushing, well, we also do this, we also do that. And they're trying to like just, it's like shooting darts in the dark. They don't know what they're aiming for. They're just throwing. They're hoping that something lands. And it's not like that. It's more about understanding the other person, understanding the position that you're in as a closer, just like somebody would in a grappling position when they're on the mat. You got to understand, okay, what can I do to get out of myself rather than just flapping your lips and shooting from the hip, rather than just throwing darts in the dark. Take a moment, understand the situation, and then go for it. I've seen people even say, go as far as to say, you know what, let me write this down real quick. And while they say that, they're actually just trying to buy themselves time so that they can respond in a more, uh, in a situation that's going to help them out. Great, man. Thank you, Rebecca. Appreciate that. Thanks for joining us. Um, so you got to ask yourself, you know, and that's one thing I like to do. Like I always record all of my calls. I always transcribe them, but I don't transcribe the whole conversation. I typically just listen to myself, what I'm asking them. Of course, yeah, I do listen to their responses, but what I'm doing is that I'm writing down every single question that I ask, and I'm asking myself like, is this the best question I could have asked? Or in some cases, I'll ask 2, 3 questions that get me there when it could have been done all in one question. And I mean, it's like I said, it's always going to be something new whenever we're on a phone call. It's not like copywriting, right? Where we kind of get the feedback, you know what I mean, according to how many clicks we get and whatnot, and we can just improve certain processes to see what would work best, how to optimize that. And in the call, we can do that the same way also. But what we do is we could transcribe our own questions, think about what we asked to get to where we were at. And eventually what you end up doing is actually streamlining that process. So rather than asking, let's say, for example, 40 questions on a phone call, if you write down every single one of your questions, analyze it, say think about what you can take out and what you don't need to ask, take all of those questions out, you can actually usually reduce it down to like less than 20 questions. It really just depends on the situation. Now, getting back into the cold calling is very different because there are ways to spark interest. And maybe we can have this training more elaborately in the next session next week on Saturday. But there are ways of getting them to warm up to the conversation so that it's not so rough. So typically, whenever we come into a conversation, like I've done a lot of cold calling. That was probably like my very first uh, quote unquote paid opportunity where, you know, I was working for an employer. They were paying me hourly plus commissions. And I was just cold calling all day long on a dialer, just calling as many times as I possibly could. And when I was on that phone call, um, I had a lot of people hang up on me right at the very beginning. And that's because I the funny thing is that when I first started, like I was already trained how to take these calls, but when I first started and they would hang up on me, my first reaction was, well, I need to talk faster so that I can convey out that information before they hang up on me, never realizing that what I'm saying is turning them off. In other words, it was like a defense mechanism where they would just turn it on as soon as they would hear me speak because it was very salesy. I don't remember because it was a very long time ago when I was doing those calls, but I remember that when we were going into those calls, it was nothing having to do with helping them out. And if you look at like the what I call my sifting script, where it's somewhat lukewarm, but you know, not quite cold. But the thing that you want to do is throw those hooks out there. And when you throw those hooks out there, it's something that captures their interest immediately. And if they're not interested, that's okay too. I mean, you just go on to the next call, right? That's part of cold calling. I think in some cases, whenever we go through trainings, we get a little bit too attached to these cold calls, and we start that's where we kind of give up. Is that we realize, hey man, I'm getting hung up on too much. But once you get into that anticipation that that's what's going to happen, your mentality and the way that you react is going to change according to that. So it does have a lot to do with mindset. And maybe that's something that we can do in a future training. But whenever you're going into into an opportunity with, I guess you could say, expectations that are way too high, what ends up happening is that when we get onto those phone calls, we end up letting down ourselves. And I think actually Dylan brought that up in the last interview that we had last week, where they come in. He was talking about like the top sales guy will always, or not the top sales guy, but the guy that says that he's going to be the top sales guy or lady, but they'll say something along the lines of, yeah, I'm gonna be the top closer. Just watch me. I'm gonna outperform everyone else. And then they're the ones that always end up giving up first. Why? Because their expectations are way too high. And when they get onto that opportunity and they're not performing, they're embarrassed by their ego. You know what I mean? Their ego told everybody that they were going to outperform everyone else. And when they can't outperform everyone else, that's a very humbling situation to go through. But in some cases, rather than going through it and saying, you know what, I'm going to do whatever it takes to become the strongest, they end up just giving up and saying, you know what, maybe this isn't for me. And I think that that's extremely important, that whenever you're on an opportunity, you talk to somebody that has already been there. Find out what your expectations should be. Because like me, for example, now when I know that I'm going to give a phone call, I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to dial 100 times and I should be able to close at least one. If I talk to 10 people, I should be able to close one. I use that sifting script. You can look back into, I think it's B2C versus B2B, cold to hot leads. That has the sifting script inside of there, inside of the chat, or if you want to check on my YouTube channel. But it's a very quick and easy way to qualify, disqualify people. And that way, your expectations, if you're held to those expectations where you understand that you are going to be hung up on, it makes it a lot easier to go through calls. And eventually, as long as you manage your expectations, you'll get to the next level, which is, okay, now how can I improve my calls? Once you start improving your calls, you're going to start realizing that there's more results, more traction. And believe it or not, you're going to be surprised because all of a sudden you're just going to close one deal and you're going to be like, I didn't even expect to close that one. You know, that's something that has happened to me quite often. There was times when I was on a phone call, and judging by the way that the phone call was going, it seemed like their interest level was low. But in some cases, like I've had prospects that test me. They want to test to see if I'm honest about what I'm talking about, you know, how much knowledge I have. And as long as you are the expert on that call, you're very knowledgeable about your product or service or whatever it is that you're offering, it does make it easier for that person to trust you, which makes it less awkward. But I remember there was times when I would get all kinds of questions and I'm like, where are these coming from? But it was really just a test to see if what I was providing was actually legitimate or if it was something that was fake. And I think that's the biggest hurdle that all of us have, is that we're on a phone call, especially when it's a colder opportunity. It's very difficult to get people to just trust somebody on a phone call. There's too many people out there that are scamming. I mean, it's just too easy to get on a phone call, overpromise, and just say, you know what, just give me your credit card number and I'll make it happen. And they say, yeah, sure. I mean, if especially if the value, like for example, I don't know if you guys ever seen like on Craigslist. I remember the first time I saw this, I was like, that way too good to be true. I'm not even going to call them because it's way too good to be true. But you'll see like a vehicle, like a car, like let's say, for example, right now it's 2020. We see a vehicle that's 2018 for $2,000. You're like, okay, what's wrong with it? They don't want to tell you. They don't want to get with you on a phone call. You're like, well, if it sounds like it's way too good to be true, I'm not willing to invest $2,000 to find out that I'm getting something that it really isn't, because that's nobody's going to give away something like that for $2,000. But that's what scammers do, right? They tell you, I'm going to give you away. I'm going to give away everything. Just give me your credit card. I'll give you everything that you need. And so in most cases, people say, wow, what a deal. What a steal, in other words. But they don't realize that they're the ones that are being robbed. It's not the other way around. So, you know, sometimes you can get into the situation like that. Actually, when I pick my opportunities, I love to find opportunities that are more, I guess you could say, hit home with me, which is over delivering. I am always one to over deliver. If anybody knows me, I'm always one to give a lot of value, no matter what. That's just something I like to do. And whenever I choose my business partners, I like to make sure that there's somebody that likes to over deliver. You know, like I've had a question, like for example, what if somebody has a question later on after the program's over and they want to get a hold of you? What do you do? And if they tell me, well, no, I'm not willing to talk to them, I get too busy, blah, blah, blah. It gets a little bit, I start to question, do I really want to work with this person? Because if it was me, if I was that business owner, if I was making a lot of money, more than likely I would say, yeah, not a problem. Just, let me know, have them email me, and I'll pick up the phone as soon as I can. I might just respond and say, hey, look, I can't get to you right now. I'm very busy, but eventually I will. Keep bugging me. And that's what I do in real life. And that's the type of person that I would like to work for. But going back to the awkward conversations, going into cold calling, you got to make sure that your expectations are where they need to be for that type of situation. You can't have overly, you can't expect to overperform. You have to be able to see the whole reality of it. Like I said, if there's people on that opportunity, it's best to talk to them so that you understand the situation. And then that way, at least you have kind of like a gauge of where you need to be and what you need to do to get to that next level to help out your prospects. But if you have any questions on this, feel free to reach out to me. I'd be more than happy to help you out. We'll do something more in depth, I think, maybe for the next training on cold calling, and how to make it less awkward so that when you're getting in there, it's not that bad. Again, the sifting script works really well because at the moment that you get on the phone call, you throw out your hooks. If they say, yeah, I actually am interested in that, then you can move forward with the conversation. If they say, you know what, I'm not interested, no problem. Just go on to the next call. But that's some of the ways that you would be able to get closes a lot quicker, and you're spending less times on unqualified phone calls. Like um, I've learned techniques where we have to warm them up on the phone call, which are good, but if it's not very niche, it's not something that I would do. It's like the sifting script is more for, it is for the niche people, but you have to find out if they actually fit in that niche. Like for example, what I was, what I was targeting was B2C prospects, and you had to find out if they were actually in that situation or not, versus like, let's say for example, B2B, if it's all coaches, then I know that I can warm them up and eventually get them to say yes or no if I need the service. But if you're on a B2C situation where you don't know their situation, you don't have that inside of the application to, be able to, I guess you could say, inform yourself of whether or not they would be in need of what you're providing, then what you need to do is just use the sifting script and just find out, hey, this is actually what we help people. This is a solution that we help people solve, or I'm sorry, this is the problem that we help people solve, or this is what we help our any of our clients with their goals. This is exactly what we do, and then they can say, yeah, I'm interested in that, or I'm not. But otherwise, you need to nurture that relationship to see if you can actually close them in that. And there's very uh, multiple ways that you can do that, just depending on what kind of situation you have. Um, but it's definitely something that is necessary. So um, again, if you're doing like warmer calls, again, you want to be able to make sure that you understand the physiology, and you do that on cold calls as well. Yes. But on a cold call, you need to approach it very differently. In most cases, I believe the reason why people give up so quickly is because their expectations are higher than they need to be. So if anybody has any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer any questions. Does anybody have any questions for me so far? Archana, thank you. I hope I pronounced your name correctly. Brian, thank you for being here. Rebecca, how are you? So if there is no questions, I think that we could wrap it up right here. I just want to make sure that that's understandable. If it's clear, if you have any questions, feel free. If we don't do this on the call, or this is you're watching the replay, feel free to reach out to me about this. I'd be more than happy to talk with you. Also, one thing that I do want to discuss is that I'm looking to put together what I call hot seat trainings. And the way that it works is that it kind of forces you out of your comfort zone. So it's not something that a lot of people are willing to do, because it does force you to be very uncomfortable on a live call, just like we are right now, and do a role play, kind of like me and Cole were doing the other day. Or if you remember a lot earlier with with Jace Gray, we had role plays. I threw in 3 people to role play with him and see what they can do to shut him down. And he handled that extremely, extremely well, which is something I'm still working on, but it definitely is good. All right, great, Mohammed. I appreciate you. Thanks for joining me, by the way. And just another reminder. I think I'm going to wrap it up right here, but just another reminder for everyone. So number one, I do want to introduce the hot seat trainings. I want to make sure that everybody can benefit from that. It is beneficial. Like for example, myself, while I was going through my sales training course, there was this opportunity to join. It was like a tournament. And so there was 32 closers, and, every week we would have, a closing call with somebody else, and then we would trade roles. And typically in those rooms, we had like, I don't know, anywhere between 10 to 50 people. I think that the most that we had was like over 100 people, but it definitely makes you very uncomfortable. But once you get kind of used to that, then it makes it very easy to do that again. It's kind of like a performance, If somebody's a really great singer, doesn't necessarily mean that they're gonna perform at their absolute best on their first time on stage. In most cases, you get a lot of butterflies in your stomach, you get a lot of stage fright. But once you work through that and it becomes more of a norm, kind of like being in front of a camera. I remember the first time I was doing this, like I was never one to be on camera or anything like that. And I remember the first time I was doing this, I was very awkward. In fact, if you watch my video on LinkedIn, my introduction video, or my it's like a generic resume type video, I was very uptight. I had shot that like 130 times. I remember I was doing it like the first day, and I did it for like, I don't know, 15, 20 times. No, no, no. It's got to be like 70 times. I'm sorry. The first time I shot it like 70 times. And then I watched it. I was like proud of it that night, And then I woke up the next morning, and I was like, shit, I sound tired as hell. I sound like I have no energy. I sound very low energy. I was like, I don't want to do this. So the next day, I went through another 70 shots just to record those 2 minutes of time on video, and I hated it. I mean, it was very uncomfortable. And then after that, I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna get onto camera, do it raw, be who I am. You know what I mean? Not try to portray that I'm somebody I'm not. And I think part of the programming that goes into sales courses does kind of it kind of influences you to be like that, a little bit uptight, and be outside of who you really are. But once you get past that, it makes it a lot easier. So there's hot seat trainings. If we could get some volunteers, anybody, I don't care who it is, if you're serious about growing as a remote closer, you're going to be impressed by, once you go through one of these hot seat trainings, you're going to feel invincible. But I think once, if we can get some volunteers to get onto the show, it's going to help out a lot. Because look, number one, you're going to get the practice, you yourself that comes on live on the show and does a closing call. Number two, you're going to get feedback from not just one people, but several people, multiple people. Number three, we're going to be able to show you how the evaluation sheet works so that we can help you get to that next level. And that way, whenever you get onto calls, you learn something new, you have less butterflies in your stomach, and you're actually working to become better at your profession, which, again, I believe that sales is the foundational work to everything that we build as entrepreneurs. But failures are the bricks that we use to build our success. And the bigger the failures, the bigger the bricks, which means that our successes are going to be a lot bigger. So keep that in mind. Don't be afraid to volunteer for the hot seat trainings. It'll be rough at first, but after you do the first one, you're gonna be like, shoot, I want to do this again. It's going to be a lot more fun, and you're going to be a lot more confident for it. And I think that that's something that's extremely important, especially being on the phone call or in person in sales, making sure that you succeed. So again, any volunteers, I'm open for it. We're not going to be rough on you. And more than anything, beyond anything else, we want to make sure that you're improving. That's the whole purpose of putting this group together. And again, if you have any questions about the hot seat trainings or anything that I've shared in this call, reach out to me, message me on Messenger. I'd be more than happy to take you through that. And with that, I would like to wrap this up. Also, keep in mind again, if you're watching this video, you like what you see, please share it with other people. It will be also on my YouTube channel. If you're watching on YouTube, please like, share, subscribe. Also, like if you're here on Facebook, join us every Saturday. The new schedule is going to be what would that be? 5 p.m. EST, 1 p.m. PST on Saturdays. That's going to be the new schedule because now we have our new podcast, Sales Porn. Very, very good. If you haven't seen that episode, it is up on our Sales Porn Live YouTube channel. You can go and take a look at it there. And I'd be more than happy to see what you guys have as far as feedback, questions, content that you want to see in the future. We do kind of give an introduction of what it is that we're going to be doing from here moving forward. But for right now, it's going to be scheduled every single month. Put it on your calendar. Friday, November 6th is when we're going to have our call, which is why I moved the sales sidelines over to Saturday, because I wanted to focus on that show. I want to make sure that it hits really well. But we're going to be discussing an interesting topic, which is, I guess you could say, the difference between ethical closing versus unethical closing, where the boundary is, and what it is that you would do. If you were in the situation where you know that all you had to do is be unethical and you could actually make so much more money, would you do it or not? And I think that's a very important topic to discuss, because when it comes to being an entrepreneur, there are going to be times when you see an opportunity that you can do it very unethically and make a whole lot of money. Yeah, of course, help out a few people in the process, but really it's just about like over promising again. And I think that that's something that people need to understand, what it is that's out there. It's going to be a very controversial topic, but I think you should join us November 6th. And I appreciate everybody that joined me today. Thank you for taking your time out of your Saturday, or if you're in Australia, your Sunday. But I look forward to seeing you guys in the next training, and we'll talk to you very soon. Enjoy the rest of your weekend.